Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for attending and sharing with us this important space today. Thank you for presenting and bringing us such important, interesting, thought-provoking topics. I want to welcome Alireza Hamedase, and I hope you're very welcome today to present, and Hussein Sardar. They are going to be presenting, evaluating the cultural and intercultural roles of the existing textbooks in Iranian public and private language education, based on the needs to adapt or develop effective materials. Next, the next presentation we're going to have is Mili Zaha. Mili, thank you so much. I know that for you it's 4 a.m. in the morning. English as a medium of instruction, EMI, in Bangladesh. Wow, the margin between teacher proficiency and student language need. And finally, Malcolm, welcome again. Dialogue, being, and interculturality. Thank you for all these thought-provoking presentations. I'm going to start with Alireza and Hussein. I think that Hussein is not here, right? You're going to present in the name of you both too. So welcome very much, Alireza. I am going to stop sharing and the floor is yours. Please remember, you all have 20-minute presentation plus 10-minute question, Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay. And actually, I share my screen with you. Okay, so that we want to talking about the, actually, as you see, we want to talking about the cultural issues in the matter of textbook evaluations. Yeah. Okay. So to see where okay, yeah. Actually, evaluation a course book is the point of the matter that we can see all of them at the cultural issue. It's not matter is to talk about all the points of the culture. Yeah, it's even the teachers issue. The teachers believe the authors and all the points is in the respects of the culture. We can talk about the culture. Okay, me and Hussein is actually a teacher in English and know actually some things about the surface of Iran, surface of the institution, and also the point that in public education. Actually, in Iran, we have 2 points. Actually, in Iran, we have the points at the textbook, because we have some point that the textbook should be actually become adapted by the cultural issue. It's really important, because some of the points in the international textbook is not adapted with our culture, and our ministries is think about that, how to change these points to actual use. In a matter of educational teaching, textbook is an essential loop in the teaching process, and it plays a fundamental role, as you know it. It's really important. And as you can see, the famous Rada list 1997 proposed that the textbooks evaluation assist teacher in reaching the value to accuracy, culture, intercultural insight into the general issues of the language. As you know, in any countries, we have 2 kinds of schools. One of them is public, one of them is private. That's private is generally under the territories of the itself, and public education is under the territory of the educational ministry, which is, as we pointed at, the governmental and non-governmental. Okay, here you can see the textbooks of the prospect. Yeah, you can see the cover page of the cover page of the textbook of the prospect is for junior secondary school in Iran. The textbook is adapted by the new versions. It's really important for us, okay, because it's a new generation of the book inside the inside the Iran. And actually the Big English and Oxford Discoverer, also the two kinds of series that is based in the international Pearson Academia and also Oxford University. Okay. And also here is the big challenge of here, the big concept. It means that what is the most recommended textbook between all these textbooks? I don't know. You know it, family, friends, you know it. I don't know, many others, but we cannot rely on just that one, that I, as a teacher, say that is good for you, okay? The matter of the evaluation is really important. The academic certification is important, and also the textbook evaluation based on the criteria that we need. Actually, as you know, Big English contains six books, which is provided workbooks, teacher manuals, and also Oxford Discoverer, okay, is also like Big English, okay, and plus some other extra material like grammar books and writing and spelling. And prospects is like all around the world's books prepared by the ministry, is just the workbook and the students' books. Okay, here are the research questions that we can look for it, okay? What are the characteristics of the needs implemented in international tech? What needs you want to have to actually to develop textbooks? This is the important. First, you define your needs, then going to find the differences between the textbooks. And also, what are the required needs in a textbook? It is important in public education of Iran, because you know that some of the needs in Iran, as you know, we are the Muslims country, and we cannot show some of the culture inside any other countries, okay? And actually the government, when it developed it, actually it mentions all these points, and also a recommended solution for that one. Actually, as a solution, okay, the last point comes first, okay? We can actually look at the international series and then get some ideas, then goes to the furthermore. Okay, if you know the big impact, okay, you should have the big research. This is a very, very vast variety of research that contains in one issue. As you can see, this is the material selection process, okay, that easily you can see, look at the content, actually compare the syllabuses, and then talking about the topics, tasks provided in the text. Is it serious or just for the fun of textbooks? What is the methodology behind that one? And then you can, whether you can get it or you can reject it. That's really good. That's really good. Actually, for the evaluation checklist that we use Mike Lee 2005. It's really important for us to know it, that one. And actually, we have the textbook contains 3 sections, which is the evaluation for the textbooks, evaluation for the teacher's manual, and the context. This is the general format. okay? And also you can see whether the content, okay, the result actually is it's important, okay? Big English, Oxford Discoverer, and also the prospect one. Yeah, the prospect and Oxford Discoverer are same like each other. It's in the methodology, okay? That Khalil is the basic methodology in these two textbook series. And for prospect, which is related to educational ministry, it means CLT. Yeah, okay. In Big English and also Oxford Discoverer, we use multi-versions activities that helps us to attract the students to the matter of the communication. The attractiveness, it means that the beauty of the textbook from the general view to inside the graphical features and how to present a total, the whole textbook is also good. But in the matter of the prospects, okay, mostly in all around the world, the ministries like to be more CLT, but here, unfortunately, in Iran, we do not use some activities and exercises very good, and also is not the proper one to attract the students. Okay, okay, okay. And actually, the vocabulary and the grammar here in Big English, we use applicable based, okay, but not in prospect is sufficient, okay. Receptive skills and productive skills also is like that. Here you can see some Khalil's characteristics, okay, the definition, and in the definitions, okay, the approach to learn the subject based on the teaching language at the same time, okay, English the medium, developing academic success, broadening perspective, building confidence, and also providing a sense of achievement. In CLT also, we put it the definition in, we put it actually the communication as a matter of fact. But in CLT, mostly we look at the communication and then we look at the tasks and the other things. Here is the material evaluation in general, as you know, for example, flexibility, engaging content, natural language, emphasizing on reviews, integrated skills. All these points, all these 12 points, okay, are come together to get the material, evaluate, and then use it. Okay. In this context, as Tomlinson said, we have the pre-use evaluation, actually while evaluation and post-use evaluation, which is in pre-evaluation, which we done at the work with Mr. Sardar, okay, my friends and colleague, okay, we use it context-free, impressionistic, fundamentally subjective, criterion reference, systematic and reliable, and also making predictions about the things. Okay, content analysis. As you can see, this is the page of the Oxford Discover that you can see. Okay, it's really important for us. You can see a lot of pictures, okay, provided by the good mood to the students, and also the task further coming. Also, here is a Big English page, okay, language in actions, functions that's from the health, and also come up by the points. This is the prospect one. As you can see, two previous textbooks, this is the Oxford Discover, this is the Big English. You can see whether the graphical design of the textbook is not so much. Okay, of course it is the colorful, it's a good in a CLT model, but it's not okay to attract teachers and students and learners actually to speak by those points. Yeah, this is the cultural sensitivity. Cultural sensitivity is something that very important, different between two countries. Okay, we can find the differences and we can find the whether both of them. Okay. Okay, here is the cultural dimension, which is over there. Okay, in culture, we have cultural knowledge, cultural values, cultural behavior, and also cultural skills that we have it. Okay, in cultural analysis, is not just pointing out that we are looking for the factors of the culture. We're talking about the factors which we students put the inside and also the teachers believe. You can see the culture territories here. Some of them are like, of course, the language, of course, the courtesy, and of course, the points. Also, okay, we can see whether, yes, this is the big English, cultural connections, okay. Here is the values, cross, okay, it's talking about the cross the street safety, and also the, okay, these two, it's for big English, the next one is for Oxford Discoverer. Here is so beautiful, but actually, unfortunately, in our country's prospect, we cannot find these points are very attractive. The students and also a teacher. At the very beginning, when I find the big English at a textbook, I said, wow, this is the things I should use it because of the because of the general format of the design and also inside. Okay, we got interview also from teachers and also from students. All those things are pointed that, okay, in Iranian textbook prospect, we do not actually have it that kind of the point. And also the result is here is in the eyes of you that you can watch it, recognizing the difference and similarities are really obvious here, making the clarification of the culture is different in those kinds of the private textbook and public textbooks, notify the prominent culture gaps. Okay, you can see, okay, whether in Iranian textbook we have the cultural gap, okay, that some cultures that we cannot actually present it in our textbooks that we can omit it. And actually, the considerability research has led us to the upcoming actually outcome that one of them, the cultural factors in official education content were fairly applied, and also the context decreases in the level of the effectiveness. Okay, and this is the final point. Thank you for the listening, and I'm waiting for you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you,
okay,
thank you, Alireza. It's been such an interesting presentation. What really caught my attention, you know, amongst many things you mentioned, but we have lots of similarities with the Colombian context with regard to public and private education. So this is very thought-provoking for us as well. I really enjoyed, you know, the fact that you tried to make a difference and to really go deeper into the type of material, the selection process, and how the adaptation process goes. This is very interesting.
Yes, of course.
So we have, thank you very much again. We have some minutes for questions. So do we have any questions? Yes, you can raise your hand. Okay, we're not, so maybe we can Alireza can answer some of your questions.
Yes,
here.
Hussein also can answer the questions too. Okay, Hussein, Sardar is
Okay,
also
so
here
welcome,
with us.
Hussein. You can also, yes, answer questions. Do we have any questions for Ali Reza and Hussein? Okay, so let me start with my own question. Sorry, I don't want
Yes,
to
of
sound
course.
selfish. Do you have any kind of let's say national policy about interculturality and cultural issues on the paper, and does it reflect on the teaching of languages exactly? And I would like also to know if you have this kind of policies, can they be easily seen in the classrooms? Thank you.
God, it's really.
Hello, and thank you for having me. It's a singular honor to be here. It was a very interesting topic to make this research or for this conference. But I mean, regarding your question, it's very complicated to deal with. Because
Imagine that.
at some point we can say yes, because we have some cultural consideration that the government is imposing to the system of education. But in somehow, when we're talking about the language, in a private school, mostly the focus is only only about the process of learning. I mean, the communication base, not also like considering the culture or the target culture. But when we are talking about the public education, it's very many different regulation. I mean, the cultural policy that they are, considering in the public system, and of course, for example, we made some example of like the we have some religious consideration. For example, it's I know that you are familiar with the context of many Islamic countries, because we have some limitation of having like some context, like talking about pork, wine. I mean, it's completely censored here, not only for the public education, but also for the book that it is published from inside Iran.
Okay, thank you, thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? I think we have time for 2 more minutes.
Okay.
Malcolm, please.
Yes, come on.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It took me back to my
Welcome.
own English teaching days, which I've done in a few countries.
Yes.
I just want to ask you this. The main bit of your presentation, I think, tended to focus on the differences between cultures. But at the very last slide, when you summarized the results, you mentioned that your respondents recognized the differences and similarities between cultures. I just wondered whether you could give us 1 or 2 examples of the similarities between cultures that emerged from any of these textbooks.
Yeah. Okay. Hussein can actually answer the questions.
Yeah.
If you like it. Okay. Actually, for the cultures, as I can say.
Ali, sorry,
Okay.
I'm here. I mean, the
Yes,
question is also really interesting for me also too.
Yes, of course.
Regarding to, similarities and differences between these 2 type of textbook. we need to, to notice that the most similarities that we consider, we find in both books is only the topic. The focusing on vocabularies on a specific topic. But the difference is, we can say certainly culture, because what we can say, what we learn in an English book, like private school book published from outside of Iran, is culturally completely different from what we have in our school. For example, in our school, we have even, the topic is about talking about the religious ceremony, our national day. Nothing interesting about the international culture, only Iranian, but in English, and it is the big differences actually. But the similarities, once again, I have to say that the topic-based oriented lesson, it can be the significant similarities.
Okay, yes, thanks very much for that. I guess just my comment would be that, in adapting these textbooks, even when you say that there's quite a lot of emphasis on religious ceremonies and religious activities in Iran.
Yes, of course.
These are common to other cultures, even. So, in a way, I think one of the directions we're going is maybe to kind of explore areas of commonality rather than kind of difference. And just my last thought, Chair, if you permit me, I wish we had more time to discuss, because I would be fascinated as to how much time your students actually spend on the internet in intercultural chat rooms. Maybe this is just a fantasy of mine, but if that fantasy is true, then actually outside the classroom, they will be establishing common communication with people from all around the world, perhaps. And that facility is there possibly, if it's not censored. I just don't know the details, really, obviously, of your content.
Thank you, Malcolm, for feedback, and thank you, Alireza and Hussein again.
Thanks a lot to see you.
Great presentation, thank you. So we're going ahead right now. Could you please, Alireza and Hussein, type your emails in the chat so we can all have them, just in case we have more questions.
Yes, of course, of course.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I
Sure.
just want to
and the final, I have to thank to everyone to attend to our presentation. Thank you again.
Thank you. Can you see my screen right now?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. So we want to welcome Mili Saha, English Medium Instructions EMI in Bangladesh, the margin between teacher proficiency and student language need. Mili, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Beatrice. I'm just starting sharing my slides. I hope you can see this.
We can see that perfectly.
Okay. So let's begin. So good evening, everyone. Actually, this is evening in my country. Probably it's early morning in Colombia. And last week I had another presentation in Colombia, and definitely I'm quite adapted to this time adjustment. So that's no worry about that. And so welcome everyone. My today's presentation topic is English medium instruction in Bangladesh. Although this is new as a pedagogic practice, but we have so many things to discover regarding issues and advantages that our learners are having. So the margin between teacher proficiency and student language needs was my personal observation since my own child learning in EMI as English version schools. So that was my personal observation for a year. And then after coming back from Borno, my studying and master's in education, then I decided to conduct this research. And I'm quite privileged to have the opportunity to present before you. So to introduce my research today, I just want to check back some recent literature that have some results and findings and some issues that they were discussing that really match with mine and my context and the findings. So as we all know that EMI in my context, in a non-native context, is usually meant that we use English to teach all the subjects, including English as a foreign language or second language itself. So, and this is, I don't see this as only a linguistic pedagogical change, rather it's it creates a new pedagogic ecology that creates a balance between local and global education itself. And that's why the significance of English as medium of instruction in such an underdeveloped country is immense, and guardians and parents are more inclined to manage their children to get this education, although this is expensive and rare in itself, since the schools are mainly located in the urban areas and rural learners are not having these opportunities. But existing researchers report there are some contradictory things or findings that shows both positive and negative correlations between EMI and learners' achievements. So that really made me interested to do an investigation on that. And my research reports on a perception-based inquiry, although I hadn't planned to observe classrooms, but since there was prolonged lockdown and I could not observe the classes, so that's why the research is a bit in a small scale now, but definitely I will extend it later since the schools are going back to physical classrooms once again. So my research inquiry actually focused on the high school English medium instruction program in Bangladesh, and this specifically focuses on the interaction between teachers' instructional competence that the teachers perceive and the learners' language learning needs. But students' effort and agency invested in understanding and executing this specific pedagogy and that usually have teachers limited teacher proficiency, and definitely some other contextual barriers are there. So students, EMI students or learners have some special role when they manage learning in such an adverse context. So definitely this is challenging when they are going to second language instruction in a country where they have limited language socialization opportunities outside the classroom. So to check a bit about the literature review shows that English has increasingly been used as a vehicular pedagogy language in the educational context worldwide, and definitely in the expanding circle where English is being usually taught as a foreign language. But when we switch back to EMI, English is taught as second language. So that's more expanded and more challenging. And students' language performances, use, and understanding depend on the EMI classroom structures and teachers' efficiency and the way they teach, and the learners' agency and the affordances that they manage to learn the content and the language at the same time. So they have dual challenges, and definitely adequately competent EMI teachers are the common grievances in such context because they avoid addressing language issues because of less expertise or awareness about the emphasizing language and content equally. And as in my research, I found teachers usually focus on content and some teachers focus on language, but language and non-language teacher never can make a balance between teaching language and teaching content. So the theory that supports my research is a critical intercultural communication theories, and the perspectives actually tells about the dialogues and the interactions that are made between the power structures. I mean, the top-down process that is involved in English as medium of instructions, like the structures or the context that say that we have to use English for learning everything. And definitely students are not ready to accept that imposed instructional language, and definitely classroom is now being showing as a colonized context where teachers and learners are being imposed a language from a center, that is administration or the school management. So the invisible power dimensions definitely constitute and frame our intercultural communication encounters in society schools, and the other relationships and everyday experiences that they have with their cultural identity and language and communication styles and practices. So the critical intercultural communication here involves, it says it's not limited to one-to-one contacts. Instead, it includes all the multi-layered dimensions of power prevailing in specific context, including the classroom, where learners are more vulnerable with teachers' knowledge and their ignorance. But once again, the other challenges coming with the teachers' language and their, the conflict between school language and home language. So I found the research is very significant for my context, and that's why I checked the literature and I found, none of the local research really address this, the conflict or the relationships or the interactions that the teacher proficiency and the learners' specific language needs have. So adding to the recent literature, in my literature, my study scrutinizes how the subject teachers deliver English medium instructions and how the learners act upon the language inputs to learn the language and the subject content, since they are being taught science and maths and the other social science, the other complex subjects also in English. So my research questions include: what are the EMI teachers' perceived instructional language competences and practices? How do they believe they are capable of delivering English as medium of instruction? And secondly, I wanted to see how do the learners situate EMI teacher talks in learning the content and the language? And finally, what are the gaps between teacher proficiencies and learner instructional language needs are prevailing in my context? So to perform the research, I had a qualitative framework, and my participants were 10 EMI teachers and students, 5 students and 5 teachers, working and studying at different levels in a local English version school. So just to introduce the context a bit, I want to share that these learners are usually coming from high income families, since EMI is expensive and the curricula is actually translated from the national Bangla curriculum. This is English, but English version, not medium. We are not following British or Oxford curriculum. Rather, we are using the local national curriculum, but translated in English. And the schools are usually called English version. And the tools that I used was semi-structured interviews, and that were taken online, and I recorded for analyzing further. And the analysis that I used was a thematic analysis and using a content analysis. So to have a quick look at the findings, actually, the teachers' perceived competence. My teachers said, and also to introduce my teachers, most of them are my students, my direct students, and they are teaching at high schools or colleges that we say 11th and 12th grade. So the first teacher said EMI is viewed as English only instructions, basically, and which is solely teachers' responsibility. Management usually tell them that this is your responsibility to deliver the lecture in English, and English version or English medium or English instructions means you will always speak in English, and that's it. So the learners' learning responsibilities or the learners' communication language or socialization language are not usually instructed, and the teachers are not told how to make a balance between learners' needs and the management's motto or the philosophy that the EMI philosophies that they are introducing to the teachers. So English language teaching is not concerned. They never focus on language teaching. They said you have to speak English. So teachers' speaking skills or instructional capability is the first concern with the management, and teachers' English proficiency matters. The authorities suggest to use English only approach, which is thought to be the only successful implementation of EMI. So I asked my respondents, what do they tell you when you are being recruited? So what are the communications about the EMI expectations that they have? So they said they just tell we need to use English all through the class and socialization, that's it, but no discussion about no opportunities to have collaboration between students or teachers. So one of the respondents said, however, learners find English only approach difficult and challenging for learning the content and subject matters. When I continued speaking English only, science and maths classes were total failure. Hence, I have started mixing code and translanguaging although I had to clarify why I did that. That means the management asked them, why are you mixing codes? So, but I have to do, which is a reality. So that means EMI is really not being English as a medium of instructions. They say we start the greetings and start the lesson in English, but while I am explaining the difficult or the complex things, definitely I have to switch back to Bangla, the learner's first language, because they say we are not understanding. I see the faces are blank. So definitely I have to switch back. The teachers can deliver the whole lecture in English, although they do not do that. They are capable of doing that they said. So from the authorities' perspectives, they are failure in AMI, but successful from the students' perspective since they focus on both the language and content learning. And the other respondent said, if I use English only approach, the teaching looks vague and I sound like crying in the wilderness. So I had a second thought. I had to consider students' betterment. They want to learn and I am here to teach. Since I was a student in this school, I perceive the learners' needs even better than the management. So they want us to discuss in their first language. And that is what the teachers are doing. And so obviously there is a conflict between teachers' practices and students' language needs. And but it is not with teachers' proficiency always that we think that teacher cannot deliver in English, but definitely they believe we can do it, but our learners need first language. That's why we have to continuously switch back to Bangla, or we have to use translanguaging. So very few teachers possess adequate language competence to explain and make the students understand the mathematical analysis and the scientific procedures in English. So they have more problems with these two areas like science and maths, not with the other subject areas and specifically English or grammar or other things. So however, it is not teacher speaking skills, instead instructional language deficiencies that contrast with the learner's needs. So often learners believe their teachers are not efficient enough. So I asked them why learners think this. So they say teachers usually struggle at the beginning since they are not much fluent and speak with interruptions. So they need training. They say that at the beginning of my career, definitely I couldn't manage speaking everything in English or explaining everything in English. So that's the point. Although they know the subject related terminologies, they have issues with the fluency and action vocabularies, particularly the verbs that they use. So one of the teacher respondents said, however, every teacher doesn't possess similar education background or competence. Some teachers coming from non-language or rural background might lack necessary fluency, terminology, and accent that look clearly inadequate to teach in a EMI context. Even some English teachers have accent issues that surely impacts the learning. So this really creates a negative impact on the students. They believe their teachers are not able to speak good English or standard English that they usually expect in a school context. So the EMI philosophies are not usually communicated with the teachers. The authority advises to use only English in teaching and social communication, and that's it. That's all about EMI. But the teacher respondents say this is wrong, and learners understand neither grammar nor maths or science without using Bangla. And the authorities never understand the real instructional language needs. Learners feel bored when we continuously speak English and they look blank. We observe outside if the principal is roaming outside around before explaining something complex in Bangla. So there is a conflict between management's authoritative manner and teachers' freedom. They believe their learners need Bangla, so they use Bangla, and definitely they have to hide it that we are not really doing this. So all teachers and students acknowledge the needs, but they cannot share it with the authorities. So one of my students who teach English said, I asked them to go to the principals to get permission when they request to use Bangla in explaining difficult or new topics. So they are equally meritorious like the Bangla version students, although they lack in-depth knowledge. Because of this conflict between needs and practices, the quality of English version program is being deteriorated and the goal is not achieved. So, however, we focus much on subject knowledge, and hence, since they have to pass exam and have good grades, so language proficiency is ignored. Even the language teachers are not adequately aware of this, and the translated textbooks are full of mistakes. So these are the contextual barriers that that really makes the learners limited about language skills or getting the content knowledge in depth. So I asked the learners, 5 of them, that what language, what type of instructional language that a desire, or they do need to learn perfectly, and whether this really conflict with their expectations and their teachers' competence. So they said managing speaking English or understanding content-based teacher talk is not challenging at the elementary level. Because they have low proficiency at that time and less expectations. So definitely they are quite happy with their teachers' competence. So these teachers develop our speaking skills since they are specially trained in teaching in English version curricula. However, both English and Bangla version teachers are collated in the middle and senior section. So here is the problem starts. And the maths and science teachers are especially not aware about using appropriate English vocabularies or the verbs that they need. So every one of them are not equally accustomed of speaking or teaching English. So the problem really starts with the senior or junior sections. And one of the our respondents said the lessons delivered in English are mass and scattered since the vocabularies, tenses, and the syntax are often not appropriate. And these sound rather different from what they are supposed to be. So that's obviously the less competence of the teachers, and frequent code switching. The crucial type is that frequent code switching creates the content lessons haphazard, and especially if the teachers lack speaking skills. And these are quite related to language of instructions and assessment. So I asked them, what about assessment or testing system? They said sometimes we do have problems in understanding the questions or teachers' expectations while they are evaluating us even. But the learners can use teachers' body language or peer help to make such language deficiencies and to make this up. But even in online classes, they could not even get that. And they also use L1 and additional resources to be clarified about the lessons. And the other respondent said, if I do not understand anything, I request them to repeat. And I also use higher level text and parental helps. My parents are capable of doing so, but all parents are not equally educated. So at the end of every session, many of my peers discover several important topics they left without studying. And they have some knowledge gaps or they have weak basics. So even the home tutors fail to provide all necessary backups. So definitely they have some knowledge gaps, or they are quite confused whether they have really learned enough for the grade. So not that every students can manage getting outer help, or they can manage internet resources or the things, but teachers use many alternative internet materials in online classes, which is often not available in the physical classes. And they said teaching in EMI is often robotic in the physical classes, because they have managements or authorities pressure that they have to use English. Now they cannot make it natural the way they understand themselves, and they can their learners understand. So English only approach creates the class artificial or imposed with unsmooth delivery. So both of the parties are struggling really to learn or to teach. So one of the respondents said our teachers are quite knowledgeable or motivated to teach using advanced concepts and sharing enriched content from Bangla version. So they need to take help from the books, the texts that are written in Bangla, because they need in-depth knowledge and that they cannot manage to do in English. So neither the non-language teachers are unskilled, although the differences are clear. They have good lesson plans too, but language use has often no boundaries, because this is emergent, and what they plan, often they cannot execute because of the language limitations. Either the learners do not understand, or the teachers cannot manage all the syntaxes or all the vocabularies that they need to deliver what they have planned to teach. So the EMI students enjoy a positive environment of using English language for social communications or cultural purposes, but definitely this is not happening much positively inside the classroom for instructional purposes. So the last word that I quote from my respondents is that sometimes we are demotivated when the teachers plan lessons that we understand, but they cannot deliver it accordingly. And if they cannot make us understand, it is a complete failure, and we often have questions, but the teachers cannot communicate or respond. We feel frustrated. And if they do not know how they will teach, we lose reliability. That's it. That since they want to see that teachers can answer everything, definitely when they struggle with language, it really gets the confidence is reduced, and they are not much impressed with the teacher's knowledge or delivery. So I asked both the teachers and the learners if you have any suggestions to improve the situation and the conflicts that you are having or the boundaries that you are meeting. So they have many of those, and I'm just telling several suggestions here since all cannot be accommodated here. So teachers should decide regarding the percentages of blended instructional language needed and used in EMI classes. They need appropriate configuration that when they should use Bangla and when they can use English from both the learner side and teacher side. So they believe the admin needs to take initiatives and they should have a research and students need-based research and a policy that they need so that they are not much scared about instructional language, whether it is working in my class or whether this is working with the management. Secondly, the teachers need instructional language development at the same time, including code switching and translanguaging training, but not only acquiring speaking skills. And it should be regularly updated since the teaching methods or the text or curricula change every year. And thirdly, in addition to the education managers and non-language teachers, many English teachers coming from literature background are not aware of the current second language teaching or learning theories like this world Englishes or ELF, the critical intercultural communication theories, or English as international language, where we have some flexibilities and we can accommodate a first language or the local varieties inside the classroom. So if the teachers are not aware, definitely they will not take these advantages, or they will not be able to make a balance between first or second language inside the classroom or pedagogical purposes. So teachers, students need to be clearly instructed about mandatory target language socialization in the school campuses, because they are quite ease and definitely they are quite comfortable with using English informally first than they are using for learning purposes. So teachers are often pressured and harassed for improving their language skills, but they are not trained. So this is unfortunate, and managements need to analyze students' guideline learning needs and hear the voices. As I heard, since they pay high in EMI, and definitely they have every right to complete their learning inside the school without parental or private tutors help. And finally, they said almost all English version students attend private coaching, and that's expensive. Neither do they receive necessary parental helps. So they understand well in Bangla, that's why they need it. And we have to understand that we need it. So integrated language in education policy would help, as they believe. And just to summarize or to conclude, I can say that we do have problems. The teachers have problems, specifically the non-language teachers who are teaching the critical subjects like maths or science. So they need training, and definitely by applying agencies, learners try to manage the knowledge or instructional language gap, and they have agencies to manage the affordances. So this is also strugglesome. Definitely we have to take care of that. And teachers confront issues with English only approach, definitely vocabularies and sentences that explain mathematical other things. So those teachers, science teachers, need special training at the same time. And finally, inadequate communications about EMI policy and perspective that impede students' linguistic gains or stemming from teachers' unawareness or one-way focus, like I have to teach maths and I have to teach language. So they have to remember that all of us are teaching the content and the subject as a language at the same time. So I hope I'm not too late and not taking much time. In fact, that's all from me today. And these are the references that I used for my research. And thank you, everyone, if you have any questions. Yep.
Thank you a lot. I'm sorry because I was just trying to tell you that time was over. So, but it was a great presentation, and especially because we are in Colombia, for example, we are very new at EMA. Okay, so it's been so interesting to see that you have this thorough, rigorous research on the topic. I am afraid we only have maybe chance for 1 or 2 questions. Please, Hane.
Thank you very much, Beatrix. And I was really enjoying this, because this took me back to about 10 years ago when we did this kind of research in my home country, Denmark. And I actually find it very interesting that in your context, which for some reason is different, your findings are very similar to what we've seen in some of the applied linguistics research that's been going on with the great expansion of internationalization, higher education in Denmark, Sweden, probably these 2 countries in particular. So you may actually want to look up some of that material, and I think you're going to find perhaps some inspiration, because this is done by researchers working, of course, in an environment where English is not a native language, or indeed a language of colonialism, but the first, second language, if you like.
Thank you. I will do it.
Great. Do we, I think we have time for one more question, comment, suggestion. Okay. So I just want, I just have a very, you know, I just want to take it very briefly. You know, here you have lots of criticism towards EMI. So, you know, you have people advocating for EMI. To define this in 1 minute in your own situation, in your own country.
Sorry, Beatrice, I couldn't get you because the line was a bit unstable. Could you please repeat the question?
Yes, we have lots of criticism here in Colombia, you know, people in favor of EMI and people absolutely against EMI. What's your take back in your context? Just in 1 minute, please.
Yeah, you know, personally, I'm for EMI because I believe that we need the purpose of introducing this pedagogic practice was to raise a bilingual generations that we really need, because when we are learning English as foreign language as only a subject, definitely it doesn't work. We study for 12 years at school levels, but still we cannot speak or still we cannot write the language correctly, and we need it for higher education or immigration purposes or other job purposes, and even if in the local context for multinational companies and other things. So we need it, but definitely we have to have a proper teacher training. That is our responsibilities to initiate at our universities, and that's why I'm researching, and hopefully I will be able to do it in 2 to 3 years after completing my PhD. So that's I'm really hoping for. But my take is that it should be there, and definitely we have to work for it. Definitely it will take some time to get everything going properly, but I'm not against it. I really appreciate the things that still students are liking, and the parents are really going for this. At the beginning, everything is really struggling, so I don't mind about that. I want to search it and get the problems out and suggest the solutions that's possible for me.
Thank you a lot, Millie. Thank you, and we hope you go ahead with your research and you have some successful experience to tell later about us. Maybe you want to visit us again next year for IALIC 2022. Thank you. Okay, so we are approaching to the end. I am going to stop the screen for a sec. And now we're ready to continue with Malcolm. Give me 1 sec here. Okay, so Malcolm, thank you because you're here today to share about dialogue being an interculturality. Thank you a lot. So Malcolm, the floor is yours. Malcolm, I think you're muted. Thank you.
Okay, here we go. Right, good morning to you all in Bogotá and to whatever time and whatever place you're in throughout the world. And thanks to Alireza and Millie for your fascinating presentations. I was an English language teacher before in many different countries in previous lives. So it was great to get back to those times. And I think irrespective of the language or the subject matter which one is trying to communicate, in a way as teachers, we're all trying to get our students really to invest themselves in the language and in the communication with other people, be it the teachers, the students, or other peers that they might have internationally. Therefore, at the core of intercultural communication, I think there is this concept called intercultural dialogue, which is often bandied about and is very often mentioned in the literature. Therefore, I've been wanting to dig deeper for some time into the issue of the relations between dialogue, being, and interculturality, And that's what we'll finish this panel with today. Right, the background to this talk was a critical exchange I had with Hans Ladegaard and Alison Phipps when they were drawing together their special issue of IALIC entitled Translating Language and Intercultural Communication Research into Social Action. It also builds on previous engagements in IALIC that I've had with intercultural ethics, particularly my work with John O'Regan, which has been picked up by Juliana Ferri and Maria Dassley. And I also just want to key into the long and rich tradition of intercultural communication, language teaching, and critical pedagogy in the Global South, particularly drawing on the work of Paulo Freire, who said, I think very relevantly to this presentation, that dialogue is an existential necessity. Though different philosophers and different teachers have said words like this, but just what is meant by dialogue, what is meant by existential, and what is meant by necessity is open to question and debate. Okay, the thing that pressed my button, so to speak, in Alison and Hans's introduction to the special issue was when they got to this bit, referring to the work of Hans-Georg Gadamer. They said that Gadamer claims that genuine dialogue has the potential to be transformative and should embrace qualities such as respect, trust, openness, and freedom of expression. Now, I questioned them on the notion of genuine dialogue, having been influenced quite a lot by post-structuralist thinking, and queried the use of genuine in this context. But I couldn't in the end dispute that Gadamer had used this term. But Hans and Alison were gracious enough to put this rider in to their introductory paper. They then went on and said they believe genuine dialogue to be necessary as allowing a distinction between the cosmetic exercises in listening, consultation, or dialogue, and the kind of communication Buber describes in his book, I and Thou, originally entitled the journal in German, Ich and Du. So what I wanted to do, there's been quite a lot of work written in intercultural communication, which draws on the work of Hans-Georg Gadamer, but less has really gone into Buber's work in depth, in my view, although I'm happy to be advised about that. Although Buber's work is often cited, therefore I wanted to have a closer look at what Buber actually said in his work and pull out some implications of his work for intercultural dialogue. So, the aim of this paper is therefore to draw on Ich and Du in order to critically explore the role of dialogue in relation to being, what makes us exist. Loosely paraphrasing Derwin, interculturality is a process of becoming or a process of being. Praxis, from which it can be inferred that intercultural dialogue is a means of changing the world, and ethics, the idea that intercultural dialogue should be or is genuine dialogue. Okay, now I want to just share with you my reading of Buber's work and pull out some of the main points that I think are salient to intercultural communication. And then I'll go on for a little assessment of his work. Intercultural scholars are drawn to the aura of Buber's philosophy as set out in Ich and Du because of his central thesis, and this is something I've been running for quite some time in IALIC, that humans do not pursue an autonomous existence. Rather, on this argument, which some of you will be familiar with already from my previous presentations in IALIC, humans exist in and through their relations with other entities. We are, a man is not an island, a woman is not an island. Humans exist through their relations with other entities, for Buber, whether they're inanimate, animate, or divine. What is interesting for our field of intercultural communication is that Buber distinguishes these three spheres of human relations in terms of the extent to which they realize through language. First, man's relationship with other humans. Secondly, people's relationship with nature. And thirdly, people's relation with God. Okay, let me just expand a little on those three relations and make perhaps some weird connections with other themes that are already running in our conference. On Buber's argument, our relation with other humans is carried out through language, and in his words translated into the English, takes on the form of speech. By contrast, humans' relation with nature clings to the threshold of speech. That's to say, humans relate pre-linguistically to inanimate objects such as rocks or trees. Humans' relation with God is paradoxically without speech, doesn't come through language on his account, yet begets it. This therefore suggests that human relation with spiritual beings is not accomplished in the first instance by language, but through an unmediated intensity of feeling, acting, and thinking, building on the work of Gross, 2004. Humans may then relay this experience after the event through poetry, prose, or prayer. Humans' relation to God reveals itself and creates language through the response of creating, thinking, and acting with our being, in Gross's words. Okay, now I just want to reflect back on Jose Aldamar's keynote speech yesterday, because it really struck me, it blew me away actually in his keynote, that the Mizak people's concept of communication, which, correct my pronunciation later if this is wrong, they call Namoi Wam, seem quite similar to Buber's sphere of humans' relation with nature. Likewise, what the Mizak tribe call Kampu Wam also, since it is the way that they relate to their ancestral voices, seems similar to Buber's idea of a relation with God. So it astonished me that right there at the beginning of this conference, there's this kind of anticipation of these three spheres that I was going to lay out later. Now, although Buber's work is drawn upon quite a lot by intercultural communication theorists, there are some real points of tension between Buber's broader kind of view of the world and of thinking and of research. Because you already get the impression that Buber has a keen interest, obviously, he comes from a lineage of Hasidic Judaism, of relationship with God or the transcendental. However, intercultural scholars tend to ignore relations with nature and God in order to bypass possible tensions thrown up by having either to engage with romanticism on the one hand or religiosity on the other, and focus on their main concern. It's really the human's relation with others that has been taken to inform intercultural communication. This sits in some tension, I'd put to you, with two arms of the scientific approach which underwrite our field. That's to say, classically, psychologistic investigations into, for example, values, attitudes, and beliefs, and linguistic investigations into the languages used by intercultural actors, classically using conversation analysis. This doesn't really kind of accord with Buber's view of the world at all. Despite this, to inform more normative aspects of intercultural dialogue, intercultural scholars have drawn upon Buber's distinction between the different ways in which humans carry out their relationships through language. On Buber's argument, humans hold a binary view, what he calls a twofold attitude of the world, which is realized through the manner in which they relate to each of the different types of beings set out above. Buber labels each of these two forms of relations with the composite pronominal words, or what he calls combined words, I, thou, and I, it. Each combination is glossed by him as a primary word in order to underscore the inextricable nature of the relationship between one human being and another. Thus, for Buber, the very speaking of the primary words, this core relationship between people, brings about human existence as we know it. On this argument, the quality of human life resides not so much in whether humans do or do not relate to other beings, but rather in the manner in which they conduct these relationships. Buber claims that those who engage in one type of relation can become different sorts of people from those who engage in the other sort of relation. And to quote, the I of the primary word I, thou is different from that of the primary word I, it. That's to say, also on Buber's argument, the quality of human existence is achieved neither through egoistical introspection nor through solitary contemplation, but rather arises from humans' capacity to engage in a heightened relationship with other beings, both living and inanimate. Again, to quote, he says, I speak of nothing else but the real man, thus he said, it was 1923 originally, of you and me, of our life and of the world, not of an I or a state of being in itself alone. And we've heard this a lot. A man, a person is not an island. This then changes the focus of the ontology of the Enlightenment somewhat. The radical relationship which Buber proposes can be constituted between I and thou is an attempt to refuse the separation from one being and another, which had been the cornerstone of the ontological argument in Europe, running through from Thomas Aquinas to Descartes and from Descartes to Kant. The I-thou relationship, and this is why his book was so important in the early 20th century, reunifies the dichotomy thrown up by the Enlightenment philosophical tradition between human consciousness and that which is perceived and experienced. When engaged in the I-thou relationship, a person neither first regards another entity as a separate being, in Buber's word, a thing amongst things, nor does one take account of an entity's individual characteristics. In this relationship, an individual does not consist of things. It does not consist of an amalgam of different bits and pieces. The idea of the I-thou relationship attempts to capture a reintegration between the person who is engaged in experience or whoever or whatever is being experienced. Again, in Buber's words, the primary word I-thou can only be spoken with the whole being. However, this supersession of the subject-object dichotomy also entails the relinquishing of individual agency by the Cartesian subject, as his or her sense of self becomes subsumed with that of another being. Again, to quote, concentration and fusion into a whole being can never take place through my agency. My emphasis here, as I become I say thou. These characteristics have led to Buber's philosophy being called existentialist, inasmuch as the I-thou relationship is forged in the presentness of the encounter between the self and another being. I behold it as that which exists in the present. This intensity also leads to the relationship being transitory, inasmuch as it immediately recedes into the past. The particular thou, after the relational event has run its course, is bound to become an it. No sooner is it formed than a person's relationship with another entity reverts to that of the objectification conveyed by the relationship between I and it. Thus, while the relationship between I and thou transcends the subject-object relationship of Cartesian philosophy, the I-it relationship signifies a reversion to this ontological dualism. This distinction, therefore, between the primary words I, thou, and I-it does not simply reside in the difference in the relationship between human beings and non-humans or inanimate objects. The I-it relationship can also be manifested between humans and other humans. Without a change in the primary word, as say I-it, one of the words he and she can replace it. The final slide in my interpretation of Buber focuses upon the ineffability of this heightened relationship between I and thou. For Buber, this is the way in which humans' relationship with God is made imminent through their day-to-day intercourse while still living in the material world. Every particular thou is a glimpse through to the eternal thou. By means of the particular thou, the primary word addresses the internal thou. So Buber concludes Ichindu then by a treatise on God's capacity to reveal himself in the world, a tenet which Buber's Hasidic Judaism arguably shares with Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism. Okay, time is moving on, and I must get to the contextualization and critique around this approach. Some of you may know that the most celebrated and trenchant critique of Buber's philosophy was carried out by the Marxist theorist Theodor Adorno, writing in 1937. Adorno lumps Buber together with Heidegger. Heidegger is the target of this particular work, entitled The Jargon of Authenticity. And Adorno takes issue with Buber's conception of the relationship with the other being achieved through language as being transcendent. He accuses Buber as having a dominant inclination to conceive a metaphysical content as bound to the so-called relation of I and thou. And Adorno objects to the fact that this content is referred to the immediacy of life. Theology is tied to the determinations of immanence, which in turn want to claim a larger meaning by means of their suggestion of theology. Thus, Adorno, coming from a Marxist tradition, resents the fact that the transcendental relation ignores the material conditions of power and exploitation in the world. Freire, therefore, makes a suitable counterpoint with Buber and Buber's conceptualization of dialogue. For Buber, dialogue, especially in pedagogic contexts, is a practical way of superseding the power relations implicit in his famous notion of banking education. For Freire, dialogue is constituted of an inextricable combination of reflection and action. Just to pick out the key bit of the following quote, "There is no true word that's not the same time a praxis," writes Freire in Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Thus, to speak a true word is to transform the world. For Freire, authenticity is lost rather when one dimension of dialogue becomes absent. An unauthentic word, one which is unable to transform reality, results when dichotomy is opposed upon its constitutive elements. Thus, like Gadamer, the true word entails transformative practice. The true word, and this is Freire writing, which is work, which is practices, is to transform the world. What? To transform the world. Okay. Now, another thought I had that creates a bit of a problem for us in the 21st century with Buber's work is the central paradox of entities being separated into dichotomous relations, which are constituted through language and discourse. These dichotomous relations, particularly that of gender, are increasingly being challenged through the deconstruction of bounded binary relations, not least by 21st LGBTQ+ groups. Just as I was looking at this slide rather baffled, I entered into an email exchange with Christina Rossi Soleil and realized also that new materialism, which she has written about extensively, also emphasizes the agentive thrust of matter. So the idea that Buber has that matter is somehow inanimate doesn't quite tie in with new theories of the vibrancy of matter. In the words of Sensitive Diver, whereby matter as an active force is not only sculpted by, but only co-productive in conditioning, enabling social worlds and expression, human life and experience. Thus, the argument that Buber makes for a substantive ontological and agentive distinction between the I-thou and the I-it relationship is in some tension with both the challenges set down in the 21st century to bounded binary relations and are new theories of the agentive and productive capacity of the inanimate, allegedly inanimate. So, looking ahead then, it has been argued that the relationship between the self and other carried out in Western philosophy and in IALIC over the years is grounded in understanding of being, which is largely derived from the concept of the Enlightenment. And I was very shaken in preparing this talk by coming across this quote from Zoe Todd, famous quote written in 2015, where she claims in her paper that ontology is just another word for colonialism. However, in Buber's defense, I would say that while he himself drew on non-Eurocentric influences, not least from Buddhism and Hasidic Judaism, his theory has been largely absorbed into the ontological tradition of canonical Western philosophy. However, I'm with De Souza Santos, writing in 2018, in saying it's time to reverse the direction of travel of this intercultural translation. On De Souza Santos's argument, intercultural translation has a central role to play in the epistemology of the South. It is a crucial role for reciprocal learning, I should emphasize, among the different oppressed groups that in different regions and at different times resist and fight against the different forms of domination of which they are victims. Last slide. Thank you, Chair. Therefore, I would conclude by saying, just drawing loosely on the accounts before, that intercultural dialogue is irreducible, imminent, and transforming. Dialogue that is intercultural, I would argue, cannot be reduced, as sometimes is the case, either to thin descriptions of linguistic exchanges between interlocutors or to behavioral descriptors of certain postulated communicative competencies. I'd also say that intercultural dialogue does entail an ethical relation with the other, drawing in Gadamer and Levinas. This can be realized through conversational interaction, as is conventional in intercultural communication, and it can also be realized through drama, music, and the visual arts, as Lou Harvey's special issue of LAIC coming up will illustrate. But for critical interculturalism, which is where I believe we sit in this conference, the ethical relation with the other has to be regarded as immanent, not as much a means of transcending the conditions of the material world, but as a means of transforming those conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you for this insightful presentation. I apologize because I have kind of background noise here in the building, so I apologize for that. Thank you, Malcolm. You know, what really catches my attention about your presentation is that now we are witnessing, you know, Latin America is a young country with regards to interculturality, intercultural dialogue. It is not a new topic, but we are just exploring, right, until right now, you know, in the sense of having this intercultural concept, like open and more flexible than traditional viewpoints. So it really caught my attention about the relations with nature and God, because you are including this in your analysis. And for example, I have observed that sometimes if you include this type of relationships with nature, then it is considered like lack of scientificism. You know what I mean? That it is not as solid, you know. So Jose Aldeman's presentation yesterday and your presentation, you know, it gives he really provide a good insights on this discussion, on this debate. So thank you for shedding some light on this. I do appreciate your presentation. Please, Malcolm, and we are ready for a couple of questions as well.
Yeah,
Please,
could I just come back to you a bit, Beatrice? Thanks very much for that comment, because it's a cue for something I wanted to say. And that is, it's interesting that Buber, writing within the European tradition, does emphasize interhuman communication. But if I understand these different types of communication carried out by the Muzak people rightly, and I stand to be informed of this in the process of intercultural translation, their principal emphasis is on communication with nature, which is getting downplayed in the Eurocentric tradition. Now, in the current conditions of interculturality, where the whole world is, if you like, threatened by a global catastrophe brought on by climate change, what could be more pertinent to the present time than that form of communication?
Awesome. You know, I really enjoyed like this eye-opening ideas, you know, and the fact that you mentioned new materialism, that is also a topic I particularly exploring with Prue. So it's interesting to see how everything can, you know, merge, and how everything can, you know, have this interesting relationship to do some more research about this. So thank you very much. Do we have questions? Please raise your hand. Thank you. Questions and or any further comments for Malcolm? Siobhan, could you please ask your question?
I think you're muted.
Oh, just let me take a look.
Hi, how are you doing?
Oh, I think it's.
Can you hear me?
I think that we can hear you right now. Maybe you can you just speak up a little bit louder, please.
Okay. Yes. So Malcolm, I was just wondering about the distinction between I, thou, and I, it. My understanding was that it was I, thou was really being very open to a human as another human, whereas I, it was almost like treating a human as a thing. Is that your understanding of it too, with that difference?
Well, I understand it a little bit different from that. I think there are two elements of that. I mean, one element of it is relating to a human as a thing. But the other element, which I don't fully understand, to be honest, because this is still a work in process. And to be frank, I've been dreading someone asking me this, and you're first in. There is also this business that I captured on a slide of the I-thou relationship sliding into the past, where the I-thou relationship becomes an I-it relationship as it recedes into the past. Now, that I might be wrong in this, but that's what I think he said. It's a while since I've read the book, to be frank. I read this last year. That does slightly disturb me, and I'm not sure that I entirely believe it. But yeah, so I think I go with you so far, but I'm also slightly perplexed myself in this business of the temporal aspect of I, thou, and I, it, and the idea. And I think he also reckons it's two-way relationship as well. Well, let me put it this way: the I-thou relationship can translate into an I-it relationship, but I said two-way loosely because, of course, I don't see that an I-it relationship can become an I-thou relationship where he was sitting 100 years ago. Now, Christina would certainly take issue with Buber on that, I think. I thought she was going to be in the room, actually, but no. So, as I say, the new materialism, I think is quite a strong challenge to this dichotomous idea. So thanks for asking the tricky question, and that's the best I can do. Okay, I'll update you next year.
Okay, thank you.
Super, Malcolm. We'll be there following you on that one. So thank you very much. I think that now we have 10 minutes before we can go ahead to the panel Meet the Editors. Not before, please. Asking Malcolm, could you please stop sharing your presentation? Could you please open your cameras, just turn your cameras on just to take a screenshot for the memories. Thank you. Thank you. So if it is possible for you, could you please turn your cameras on? Thank you very much. Great, thank you. Okay, so just for 1 second more. Camera's on. Thank you. Thank you. 1, 2, and 3. Thank you very much. So see you next at 9:10 Colombian time for the panel for Meet the Editors. Have a great time and enjoy the rest of the conference.
I'll see you there.
See you there.
See you there.